Hey, what's up guys, how's it going? In this video, you're going to learn how to add infinite scroll in React by building a simple gallery app. So this is the gallery app that we are going to build. We can search photos from here. I'm gonna search for nature. And you can see we have photos of nature, and if I scroll down, you can see that more images are loaded. This is happening because of infinite scroll. We're going to learn how to add just that. The styles that you're seeing are built with Chakra UI, which is a React UI framework. I have made an entire video about it on my channel. You can check that out. The link will be on the description. And by the way, you can play with this application. This application is also hosted on Vercel. I will put the demo link on the description. And if you see the layout of this app, this is not your traditional layout. This is called Masonry layout. We're gonna achieve this layout by using a package called React Masonry CSS. And all of these images are actually coming from Pexel API. Pexel is a website where you can get high quality images for free. We're gonna use their APIs to fetch images. And finally, I'm gonna use Next.js on my project. Next.js is the server-side framework for React. I am using it because I need a backend server, but I don't want to implement that from scratch. I'm going to use Next.js API routes. Alright, so before we get started, please consider like this video and subscribe to my channel to see more of the React-based videos. So without further ado, let's get started. Let me give you a quick introduction of mine. My name is Sanjan. I'm a full-stack web developer who can develop complex web applications from UI to backend systems. You can watch my work by visiting my portfolio website thatonjan.me, then just go to projects. And here you will see all of the projects that I have worked on. I'm looking for a new opportunity in a company where I can provide great value with my skills and knowledge. So if you are a recruiter or someone who wants a new team member who can solve problems, can develop real-world application, feel free to contact me. You can reach out to me by email, LinkedIn, or Twitter. All of the links are going to be in the description just for you. Alright, enough of my introduction. Let's get straight into the tutorial. Alright guys, so first of all, we need to create a brand new Next.js app. Just type npx create next app. Then give your app name. I'm gonna call it Infinite Scroll Gallery YT. And then I have given a flag -- use npm because I want to use npm instead of yarn. So let's create the app. Alright guys, so our Next.js app is ready. So let's cd into the app. And now we need to install a bunch of packages, so I'm just gonna paste the command here. You can find the command on my blog. These are the packages we will need, so let's install them. And our packages are now installed, and ignore this warning. So let's open up our app on our text editor. Let's open up the package.json file. These are the Chakra UI packages. This is the Axios, which is a data fetching library. This is JS cookie package, which gives us some utilities to handle cookies. Then Nano ID, which will generate us some unique IDs for React keys. And this is the Pexel package. And we have the React Infinite Scroll component for Infinite Scroll and Masonry CSS for creating that Masonry layout. Okay, so these are the packages we will need. Let's clean up our application and set up Chakra UI. So let's go to the _app.js file inside the pages directory. We don't need the CSS. We need to import the Chakra provider from Chakra UI. Let's import Chakra provider. And we need to wrap the component by the Chakra provider component. And now let's open up the index.js file. I will delete everything from here, and let's create a dummy component. I will call the component home, and let's see if Chakra UI works or not. I will copy this line, this import statement, and I will import heading component, and let's use the heading component. So on another terminal, let's run the dev server with npm run dev. Alright, so our Next.js server is running on port 3000, and this is what our homepage looks like. I will move this window to my editor workspace so that we can see what we are doing really. Alright, so now we can work on our application. So let's first create the heading. I will remove this div, and I will import the box component, which is just a simple wrapper. Now let's set width, and it will be 90%. Now in Chakra UI there's a feature called style props, and you can style components by just passing props, and W means width, which is just a short form. And I want to set margin to 0 and auto to move everything to the center. And now let's align the heading to the center, and obviously I will change the heading to pixels, and I will add some padding to top and bottom. That's why I'm using py prop, and I will pass 10, and I will add font size to 5 pixel. Now font size 5 pixel is not a valid CSS value, it is actually a theme value from Chakra UI theme. Okay, so this is our heading. Now we need to create a search form. For that I'm gonna create another component. So I will create another directory here. I will call it components, and inside the components I will create a file. I will call it search form.jsx, and let's create a component, and let's import that component. And let's just call the component after the heading. Alright, so now let's go to search form file. We need to import some component from Chakra UI React. So I will copy this import statement and I'll paste it here. I don't need these components. I will need form control component, then input component, then button component. So let's create that form. Let's add form control, and inside the form control we will add our input, and after the input we will add button, and the button text will be search. Let's pass some prop to the form control. We want the form control component tag to be form, so that's why we are passing the as prop. Then we will pass max width of 40 rem and mx for margin horizontally. We want auto to move it to the center. And if I full screen the browser window, you can see the input size doesn't grow more than 40 rem and it is at the center. So let's pass some prop to the input, and the input is required, and we want to add a placeholder, and the placeholder will be search photos, and we want to add some margin to the bottom of 0.5 rem, and let's go to button, and we will add type of submit, and we will add width of 100%. Now we need to add an onSubmit handler to the form, so let's create a function handle submit, and we will pass the onSubmit handler to the form handle submit, and in the placeholder prop the h should be lowercase h, not capital H. Now when we will type something on the input, we want to store the value in cookies so that we can use that value on other components. So let's create another directory. I will call it utils, and inside the utils directory I'm gonna create a file called cookies.js, and let's import cookies from JS cookie. I'm gonna create a cookie name which will be query, so const query, and the value will be string query. Now let's create a function called setQuery, which will just set a value inside cookies. So this will take a parameter, I will call it value, and let's call cookies.set, and let's pass the cookie name which will be query and the value. Let's create another function, I will call it getQuery. Again, it will take a value as a parameter, then cookies.get, and pass the cookie name which will be query. It will give you the value, but if the cookie doesn't exist, it will give you undefined. So if it is undefined, then we want to return an empty string. And now let's export this function, setQuery and getQuery. Let's go to search from file. So let's create an onChange handler function. So const, I'll call the function handle change. It will take event as the parameter, and let's import the setQuery function from the cookies file. So import setQuery from /utils/cookies, and let's call the setQuery function, and let's pass e.target.value, and let's add an onChange event. And let's pass handle change. So let's test it out. I will open up the DevTools. Let's go to application, and let's go to cookies, and you can see on localhost 3000 there is no cookie. So let's type something and let's refresh, and you can see that we have a query cookie and the value is this. Okay, so that's it for our search from. We have to customize the handle submit function later. We have to add the functionality to search images from the backend. So we're gonna use Next.js API routes. So let's open up the pages directory, then API. So inside the API directory, let's create a file. I will call it getPhotos.js. Let's create a function. I will call it handler, and the function will take two parameters. One will be request, another one is response. It is pretty similar to express request and response object. And inside the function body, first we're gonna check if it's a get route or not. If it's not a get route, we're gonna send an error. So if method, actually I'm gonna destructure the method from request object. So const method from request, and if method isn't get, then we're gonna return res.status, and the status code will be 405, and we're gonna send a message method not allowed. Then we need to get the query value and the page number from the request object. Now we're gonna expect two query parameter. One is the actual query text. Another one will be the current page number, which will be used for infinite scroll. So let's destructure that. Request has a query object, and inside the query object we want a query text and page number. If the query or page is undefined, we're going to return error. So if query is undefined or page is undefined, we're going to return res.status of 400, and we're going to send a message bad request. Now we need to search for photos, but we need to create a Pexel client for that. So let's import create client from Pexels. And the function will be create client. And we need to get the API key from Pexels. So let's just go to pexels.com/API. And if you don't have any Pexels account, just create one. After you create one, you'll have an option to create your own API key. I have already created one, and we need to store that API key on our environment variables. So let's go and create a file called .env.local, and let's open that up, and let's create a variable API key. And the value will be your API key, so I'm going to paste mine. So I'm going to close this file, and let's create client, and let's call the create client function, and we just need to pass process.env.API key. So let's use this client to search images. So const result await. Actually this will be an asynchronous function, so async, and let's use the client dot photos dot search, and we need to pass an object here. We need to pass query and the page. This will return you some result, and we are storing that in the variable. So let's console log that, and let's send a response res.send of result. Oops. And let's export this as default function. And just because we have added a new environment variable, we need to restart our server to get the effect. So let's again just type yarn dev, and let's just refresh this page, and let's create another tab. Actually, I'll copy this URL. Let's test the API. So just go to localhost 3000/API/get photos, then pass the query parameter. I'm gonna pass nature, then pass a page. Page number will be 1. So let's see if it works or not. Okay, so you can see we have this giant object, but we will not need everything. We're gonna get only the image URLs. If I go to the console, you can see we have this large object printed out. You can see we have this source property, and which is an object, and inside the object we have these URLs. So we just need to create an array of URLs and send it to our front end. So let's create another variable const photos, and I'm gonna map over the result. So result dot map, sorry, not map, result dot photos. dot map, and let's get the photo, and we're gonna return photo dot source dot large. There are different sizes of images available, like tiny, medium, large, extra large, and so on. So we only want the large images. And actually I misspelled the photos here, so it will be photos, and let's send photos, which should be just an array of links. So I will delete this console log. So let's see if it works or not. Let's refresh this page, and you can see we have an array of links. And if I go to one of these links, I should see an image, and you can see we have an image. Okay, so we're gonna use this URL to display images on the front end. So our API routes is done. So let's close these files, this cookies file, and let's create a file on the utils directory. And I'll create a file called searchimage.js. Let's first import Axios. And also let's import the getQuery function from the cookies file. I will copy this one. And I don't need setQuery function, I need getQuery function. And let's create another function. I will call it search images, and it will be an async function. And let's export this. Now this search images function will take an object as parameter. For now I'm gonna leave it as an empty object. So inside the function body, let's get the query value from cookies. So const query, and we need to call the getQuery function. Let's use the Axios get method. So axios.get, and the API will be /API/getPhotos. And we need to pass query parameter, so we can pass an object as the second argument of the get function. And we need to pass an params object, and inside the params object we need to pass query and page, and page will be 1 for now. Later it will come from the state. So let's get the data from the response. So const data. So this data will be this array of links, and let's return data. Let's go to search from, and let's import the search images function. Actually I made a mistake here. In the import statement of the cookies functions, it will not be /utils/cookies. I can just pass cookies here, or maybe /cookies. Okay, so let's go to search from again, and I need to import search images function from /utils/search images. And let's go to handle submit function. Let's get the event, and we need to prevent the page refresh, so e.prevent default. And now let's get the images, so const images, and again it will be an async function. And let's call the get images function and await search images. We're gonna pass an empty object here, and let's console log the images. So let's go to the localhost 3000. Await isn't allowed in non-async function. Oops, I made the component async, sorry. Now it should work fine. So let's open up the console. So let's type something like red, and let's search. We've got undefined. That's weird. Let's go to the network tab and make sure the tab is fetch/xhr, and this is our request. Let's go to preview. We have the array of results, but why it is undefined? That shouldn't be undefined. Let's go to search images. Oops, I forgot to await the axios.get method. Now it should work fine. So I will clear the console and let's search again. And you can see that we have an array of links. And now we can use these links to display the images. So we need to create another component inside the components directory. I will call it images.jsx. And let's create a component. This component will take a prop called images. And we also need to import some component. So import from Chakra UI /react, and we need to import the image component and the flex component. So these are the two components we will need, and also we will need nanoid from nanoid. And let's remove these divs. Let's add a flex component. And inside the flex component, we're gonna map over the images. And we're gonna return a component here. We're gonna return image. Let's just pass a key here. And the key will be nanoid. And let's pass the source as image. Oops. Image. And let's pass an alt text of empty string. Now let's go to the index.js file. We need to import the useState hook because we need to create a state. And now let's create an images state. I will call it images. And the default value will be an empty array. And let's import the images component. And let's use the images component here. And pass the images prop. And oops, images, and it will be images. Now if we search for something, we don't see any image because we haven't set the state yet. So we need to pass this setImages function to the search form. I'm gonna create an object here. I'm gonna call it search form props. And inside the object, I'm gonna pass the setImages function. And I will spread out the search form props in the search form. And let's go to search form. Let's destructure the props. Set images. And we're gonna set the images. And let's pass images. I'll delete the console log. So let's see if it works or not. So let's click on search again. And if I go on full screen, you can see we have a bunch of images, but they are not laid out properly. If I search for something like nature, so you can see that the search functionality is actually working. So now let's set up the Masonry layout for the images. So I will close all of these files. Let's go to images component. So let's import the Masonry component. From React Masonry CSS. And in the flex component, we're gonna pass an as prop we want the flex component as the masonry component. If you don't know about the as prop, you can check my crash course on Chakra UI. It will make more sense. So I'm just gonna pass masonry. And you can see we already have a masonry layout. See? But you can see it doesn't look good actually. On each row there is only 2 columns and it is also not responsive. So let's make it responsive and make it much better. So let's create a breakpoint object. So const breakpoint columns object, and by default I want 3 columns, and on 1500 pixels I want 2 columns, and on 800 pixels I want only 1 column. And let's pass a prop to this component, breakpoint columns, and it will be breakpoint columns object. And you can see we have only 1 column per row, and now we have 3 columns. But you can see that the images are not taking the full width of its column. So let's pass a prop to the image component. Just pass W for width and it will be 100%. And now it is taking the full width of its column. But you can see we don't have any spacing between the images. That's why it doesn't look good. So let's add some spacing, and adding spacing might be a little bit tricky. We need to attach a class name to each of the column. So I'm going to create a variable const column class name, and it will be my masonry dash grid underscore column, grid underscore column. And let's create a variable const gutter space of 30 pixels. We need to add styles through the sx prop, so let's pass sx prop, and inside the sx prop we need to pass an object. I'm gonna create an object here, const masonry styles, and on margin left I want the negative of gutter space, so I'm gonna use template string, then negative, then gutter space. Okay, so margin left will be negative 30 pixels, and we need to select this element using the class name. So let's create a selector string. So const selector, and let's use a template string. We need to pass that ampersand sign, then dot, and then just pass the column class name. And now let's create a property inside the masonry styles, and the property name will be this. So masonry styles, then pass the selector, and it will be an object. So just pass PL for padding left. I'm gonna pass gutter space, and I need to pass a property background clip. I'm gonna pass padding box. And finally let's pass the masonry styles to the sx prop, and now everything should work fine. Oops, I forgot to do one thing. I forgot to pass the column class name. So column class name will be column class name. So let's go on full screen. You can see that vertically we have some spacing but not horizontally between the images. So let's pass a margin bottom to the image component, and the value will be gutter space. And you can see we have spacing between the images, and you can see our masonry layout is looking pretty good. And actually I forgot to add some spacing between the button and this flex component. So let's pass empty for margin top of 2 rem. Okay, so now it is looking pretty good. Let's search for something else like blue, and you can see we have images of blue. Alright, so our masonry layout is done. Finally, we can add our infinite scroll feature, and that is going to be really easy. So let's open up the index.js file. So let's import the flex component and the spinner component, and most importantly, we need to import the infinite scroll component. From React infinite scroll component, and let's go to the component, and we need to wrap this images component by the infinite scroll component. So let's call the infinite scroll component, and let's wrap the images. Now the infinite scroll component will take bunch of props. It will take a data length prop. You can see that it is already giving us error. So let's pass data length, and it will be the value of total number of images. So images.length, and it will take a has more prop. The infinite scroll component will know with this prop that should it fetch more data from API or not. So we need to create a state for that. So let's create that state. So use state, and the state name will be has more, and the value will be false by default. And also let's create a page state, and the page default value will be 1, and let's pass has more. And the infinite scroll component also take a next prop, which will be a function to fetch more data. So I'm gonna call it fetch next images, and I have to call this function. So let's create the fetch next images function. So fetch next images, and it will take an object as parameter, and it will have page property, set images property, set page property, and set has more property. And inside the function body, actually I have to import the search images function. From /util/search images, and actually this fetch next images function will return another function, actually an async function. So let's call the search images function, and inside the search images function we're gonna pass an object as the first parameter. We're gonna pass set page, then set has more, and let's await this process and store the result. So const images will be await, and we're gonna set the images. So set images, and we're gonna pass a function previous, and we're gonna add our new images to the previous array of images. So prev, which is an array, and we're gonna add the concat method, and we're gonna pass the images array. Now the search images function doesn't know about this prop, so let's go to search images file, and you can see in the parameters I have passed an empty object. So let's get the properties, which will be set page, then set has more, and then page, and by default it will be 1. And I forgot to add a condition here. If query doesn't exist, we're gonna return an empty array. And in the params object, the page value will come from the page parameter, and we need to increment the page after fetching some data. So set page, and we need to pass a function previous, which will return previous plus 1. Now we need to determine if there are more images to fetch or not. We can do that by checking if the data.length is less than 15 or not, because by default we get 15 results. So I'm gonna do an if statement. So if data.length is less than 15, then we're gonna make set has more to false, else we're gonna make set has more to true. Okay, so let's open up the index.js again. You can see that we have an error, cannot destructure property page of undefined. So these properties are undefined because we haven't passed them in the infinite scroll component prop. So let's pass them here. I'm gonna pass an object, and let's pass page, set images, set page, and set has more. And you can see that we don't have any error. So let's search something like red. You can see that we still have an error. Set page is not a function, because in the search form component we have called the search images function, but we have only passed an empty object. We need to pass more props. So let's go to index.js file, and we need to pass props to the search form. So inside the search form props object, we need to pass set page and set has more, and then go to search form, and then go to search form. Let's get the set page and set has more, and I'm just gonna copy these two and I will paste it here. I don't need to pass page because page in the search form will be always 1, and in the search images function page is by default 1, so I don't need to pass page here. So let's save the file here. So now let's search again. And you can see we have images. So let's go on full screen. Let's scroll down, and you can see that we are getting more and more images as we're scrolling down. Okay, so our infinite scroll is working fine. So let's just make sure that we are not sending same request twice or more than twice. So let's go top of the file, page, and let's open up the dev tool here. I will go to the site and just go to the networks tab and make sure fetch XHR is selected. And now let's search for nature or anything you want. So we have sent a request to the backend, the API routes. It was page 1, so let's scroll down. We have a little bit problem. First it was page 1, then page 10, then page 11. That's weird. Let's scroll down again. 12, then 13, 14. That's weird. Okay, so I've got the problem. So in the search form component and inside the handle submit function, we need to reset the page to 1 every time we will search. So set page equals to 1. So now let's refresh the page. Now let's type something and search. Okay, so this is page 1. Let's scroll down. Page 2, page 3, and finally page 4, page 5. Okay, so our infinite scroll is working fine. But when we scroll to the bottom, we don't see any kind of loader, right? We wanna show a loader to the user. We can also do that. So let's go to index.js. That's why we have imported the spinner component. So let's create a loader component. And let's pass flex component. And inside the flex, we're gonna pass the spinner. We want to change the size of the spinner, and the size will be XL. And we want the spinner to be at the center, so justify content will be center, and py for padding vertically will be 2rem. And let's go to infinite scroll component. We need to pass loader prop, which will be the loader component. And let's scroll down, and you can see we have this loader, and then we have these images. Okay, so the loader is working fine. You can also do other things with infinite scroll component. Just check the documentation. So I guess that's it for our application. This is the project that I wanted to build. So let's just see the project again. I will refresh this page. Let's search for something like jungle. And here you can see some images of jungle. Let's scroll down, and here are the images you can see. Alright, so this is the project that we wanted to build. So that's it for today's video. If the video has been helpful for you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. If you have any question, please drop them in the comment section. If you want to suggest me any kind of topic or anything, just do let me know in the comment section. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Twitter as thatonjohn. And I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.